I get some pretty interesting questions. One of my most recent questions was from someone who received an inheritance of a property. Their parents passed away, they left them behind a piece of property, and they're wondering, should we keep it and rent it out? Should we sell it? What should we do with it? If we sell it, should we reinvest the proceeds into a brokerage account? What should we do? So, today I want to answer that question. As you probably guessed, the answer is not straightforward. There are some nuances, so let's work our way through that. I'm Dwayne Reinecke, the owner of Valiant Financial Planning, your favorite financial nerd. Let's dive in. All right, let's take a look at our new clients. We have Peter Parker and Mary Jane. They both have a 401k. Peter's 401k is worth about $660,000. Mary Jane's is $786,000. They have some cash in the bank. They have their home is worth $1.1 million, no mortgage on it, and they have an inherited property. That's what they have the big question on, worth $500,000. Also, no loans or anything against it. Looking at their income, Peter and Mary Jane both make $200,000, and they both max out their 401ks, and they put about $50,000 a year into a joint brokerage account. And they live off of $10,000. Some of the goals they have, again, they want to retire at 60, continue living that same lifestyle. They want to make sure they're able to travel. They go on a lot of vacations. They do about $30,000 worth of travel every year. They have home maintenance on their primary home every few years, and they also buy new cars every so often. So we want to make sure that they can achieve all this in their life, and we want to find the most efficient way to do it. So they want to know, Dwayne, should we keep that rental, rent it out, or should we sell it? So let's first look at one thing. Let's look at how much they're going to be able to rent that property for. So they weren't exactly sure, but they anticipated that they could probably rent it out for about $2,500 a month. Now, we have a couple of assumptions in there. We assume that the property will grow at a 5% annual appreciation rate. I go a little aggressive on these types of things. Historical United States residential real estate kind of across the U.S. is between 3 and 4%. In really high populated areas like New York and Seattle, it's between 5 and 6. And so I kind of wanted to put it in between those areas. And then if they rented out $2,500, we would assume that they would increase that rent about 3% every year. All right, so let's dive into it. All right, so here we are. Look, they're already over 70%. That, for me, is a win. I mean, what I'm looking at here is whether they sell the property now and reinvest the proceeds, or if they stick with their current path of renting out that property. Both are at a 73% probability of success. Both are going to be successful. We don't have to worry about these ending balances for right now. I mean, this one makes sense. They sell the $500,000. They invest it. Of course, they're going to have more money in their accounts whenever they pass away. But just looking at the probability of success, it's the exact same. What about if they sold the house in 5 years? They let the house grow. They got some of that rental income. Still, 73% probability of success. We're looking at the same thing here. So what I would tell them is there's not a right or wrong way to do this, especially at that level. But there's a few more nuances. What if when they rent it out, they can't get $2,500? What if they only got $1,500? Okay, so I'm going to change their rent to $1,500 now. And let's see the difference. All right, so I have adjusted the rental income to be $1,500 now. So here we are at $1,500, the current plan, versus if they sold the house at retirement or if they sold the house right now. If they sold the house right now, they'd have a 73% probability of success with a $4 million ending balance. 73% is higher than 62. Now, 62% isn't bad. It just has a less chance of success. There's more of a chance that they would run out of money before they passed away. So for me, this is a kind of an indication that potentially we would want to look at selling the house. Now, this is a scenario where they are renting it out for a lower amount than maybe they could. But let's look at one. What if they actually rented it for more? All right. All right, I've changed the rental income to be $4,000 a month instead of $2,500. So in that scenario, if they kept the rental property, has a higher probability of success than if they sold it now. Now, what if they said, Dwayne, we don't really want to keep it and rent it, that I would rather sell it because renting it is like a pain in the butt, or I don't really want to have to deal with that. Then I would look at this and say, well, if you sold it, you're still at over 70% probability of success. So that there's a likelihood that would still be successful. A lower probability of success here, but you don't have that headache. That might still be worth it. So that the client can take that information, do with it what they will. They can kind of make their decision there. Now, we didn't look at other things. We didn't look at what if we changed their asset allocation and we invested their portfolio a little differently. We didn't look at different Social Security strategies. We strictly were just looking at if you kept your same investment strategy, you sold the rental property and reinvested those funds, what would that look like? So, and there's other scenarios here. There's many ways that we can look at this. One of the things that I would first probably look at is what is their investment strategy, right? Right now, he has a 60-40 portfolio. That's what we have in there, right? He's in his 50s. That's kind of common that I would see someone around that age have a conservative type of portfolio like this, where they have 60% of their portfolios in equities. They have 40% in bonds, and maybe that's good. But if they sold that house, they could consider increasing the amount of equities that they hold in their portfolio. Real estate can be a really great way to grow your wealth. Now, this is especially true if you are just getting started out and you don't have a lot of savings, right? You can borrow money to buy a house, a mortgage. There's not a lot of ways that you can borrow money to invest and grow your wealth, but that is one way you can. If you borrowed money, mortgaged a house, and got your rental payments to cover that mortgage, that's a pretty great way to grow your wealth. Now, at a certain point, it might make sense when the appreciation of the house has grown a lot to sell it so that you can reinvest the money in a more liquid way, especially as you're coming into retirement. Now, there's some pros and cons there. In retirement, rental income can provide some stability. If you tack that onto with a pension, some Social Security, that's just adding into your reliable income that you can have month in and month out. Now, on the other side, if you have a pension and you have Social Security, maybe you have a military retirement coming in, you might not need another source of stable income. You could use some appreciable assets that could grow like stocks. So maybe reinvesting that money in a stock market or a more equity heavy portfolio could make sense for you. Either way, there's no wrong answer here. We just have to work through what makes the most sense for you. Now, I know if it was me and I was wanting to rent out a property, it would depend on where it's at. If this is an inheritance that I received and mom and dad lived out in the woods somewhere and there's not a lot of people around that are going to want to rent that house out, I'm probably thinking I might need to sell that. Now, if this was on the beach, it was in Seattle, there's a condo somewhere and there's a really easy way to rent that out, maybe even short-term rentals, and it seems to be a very profitable area, then that might make that decision up for me as well. So anyways, there's a lot of ways that we can run through this. I think that everyone's situation is different. Your situation is different than mine. So we would want to kind of work through that problem and see what does math tells us, but then also, are there any sentimental values on the home? Where is it at? What type of other features are there? Maybe some lifestyle perks like a beachfront property that could be involved there as well. So, well, if you have any questions that you want me to run through, send them my way. I'm Dwayne Reinecke with Valiant Financial Planning, your favorite financial nerd.